Good afternoon and welcome to this jointly organized webinar between EPTRI and European Institute for Innovation Through Health Data. Our today's webinar is titled Unlocking the Potential of Real-World Health Data for Pediatric Clinical Research. This webinar is the result of collaboration between the EPTRI and the European Institute for Innovation Through Health Data, reflecting a shared effort to address the highly relevant topic of the real-world health data in pediatrics. I am very honored to chair this webinar today. My name is Marek Migdal. I am a pediatrician from Warsaw. In the EPTRI, I am the member of the board of directors and the treasurer of this infrastructure. But also, as I said, I am a pediatrician with experience in pediatric intensive care. And since 2018, I am the CEO of the Children's Memorial Health Institute in Warsaw, which is one of the members of the EPTRI research infrastructure, but also is one of the biggest stand-alone tertiary pediatric hospital in Europe, also having the status of the research institute dedicated for pediatrics. And now I would like to introduce to the participants of today's webinar very briefly the EPTRI. What is EPTRI? EPTRI is a pan-European research infrastructure bringing together 27 members across 15 EU and non-EU countries and connecting hundreds of research units to strengthen pediatric research and accelerate innovation for children. Hosted at the Leuven University in Belgium, it operates as a non-profit network providing integrated services across the full research pathway, from disease characterization and medicines and medical device development to clinical research, support and secure health data services. On this slide, you get the logos of the members of the network and also the pathway of the services which are provided by this infrastructure. What is important that the role of the EPTRI is also very strongly engaged in training and European initiatives and projects supporting capacity building and collaboration across the pediatric research ecosystem. So this is a short description of the EPTRI, and it is my great pleasure and honor to ask Professor Kalra, President of the European Institute for Innovation to the Health Data, to introduce himself, but also his institute. Please, the floor is yours.
Marek, thank you very much for that already warm introduction, and good afternoon to everybody who's on the webinar today. We are delighted to partner EPTRI. Our institute focuses very much on health data, and real-world data is indeed the title of this webinar today. Our role is to be the champion for how health data can be useful and deliver the best value across multiple stakeholders. You can see many different stakeholders in the circle on this slide. Our role is to say, well, how can health data improve healthcare? How can we capture better data, share better data, have good quality health data for patient care? So their care is safer, they more quickly are diagnosed, get the correct treatments, and they have the best quality of life that healthcare can help them to have. And at the same time, how can we reuse all of that health data to make healthcare smarter and research more efficient so that we can get new drugs, new vaccines, new digital health tools, new AI algorithms that help patients in new ways, quickly developed, quickly tested, and in the hands of patients and clinicians together to improve care. As Marek said, we're neutral, not for profit, and we don't have data and we don't use data. Our role is to work across all of these different actors to develop good practices, good methods, education, and to really, if we need to, lobby a little bit with decision makers to let them help data to deliver the best for everybody and for society. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now, I would like very briefly describe to you the agenda of today's webinar. The agenda you can see on the right part of the slide is structured into 7 sections, including patients' perspectives, structural barriers, opportunities from the health data, enabling frameworks, and the extremely important part of the webinar will be interactive session on what stakeholders can already do today to improve the use of this real-world data to support pediatric research. We very warmly encourage all participants to raise questions in the chat. We'll be later opening, trying to respond for these questions or to comment the questions. And also, we plan to get additionally to this interactive discussion, also the questions after each part of the webinar. Now, I think that if my co-chair, Deepak, agrees, we'll go to the section dedicated to the young patient or young person perspective. And if you agree, I will introduce the first patient.
Perfect.
Later, Deepak, please introduce the second person. And we will start with the first presentation. This talk will be given by Valentina Jarvi, the patient representative, the member of the Teddy Kids Network in Bari. Valentina, please. The floor is yours.
Great, thank you. So, hello. Today I'm going to be talking about clinical trials, their advantages, their downsides, but also improvements or opportunities. So this will be based on my experience as well as the experience of other pediatric patients. Is it possible? Yeah, thank you. So first, clinical trials can be very helpful, but they also have challenges. So to start off with some positives. For many pediatric patients, taking part in a clinical trial means helping doctors and researchers learn more about diseases. This could help improve treatments, not just for them, the patient, but for other children in the future. It can also give pediatric patients access to new treatments that aren't available yet. Sometimes this can even help their own condition. Another important thing is that it allows young patients to take an active role in their health or in their condition, which can feel very empowering and make them feel as if they are actually useful with their disease. However, there are also a few downsides. First, travel burden. Many patients might have to travel far, sometimes even to a different country, which can take time, cost money, and can be very tiring, especially for pediatric populations of rare diseases where there are fewer people. This may lead to miss of school because of hospital visit, but also side effects. There is also a lot of uncertainty. Young patients don't always know if the treatment will work, and that can be very stressful or discouraging. They might also experience, as said before, side effects because of the treatment or not receive the actual treatment if they are given a placebo. And there is not enough of a psychological help or protection surrounding this. Another big issue is the lack of clear information. Young patients or participants and their families don't always know enough about the trial. I've had this in my experience, like how many people are involved, if it's possible to tell, what treatments are being tested, or what the goal of the trial really is, not just what we're going to be given as a treatment. Also, to finish off, questionnaires in trials don't always reflect what pediatric patients actually feel. For example, in my experience, they don't include things like fatigue, emotions, mental health, or difficulty concentrating, even though these really affect a young person's daily life. So, what can be improved? First, very easy, there should be more opportunities for pediatric patients to join clinical trials. Now, this links into communication. Patients are not always aware of ongoing clinical trials happening, and their doctors neither. I know that there are some websites that gather clinical trials happening so that patients can apply. But the problem is that the patients aren't aware of such websites. For example, who knows CureWiki? I didn't know about CureWiki until a few weeks ago, and that was just because of my involvement as a patient expert. This is to show how many patients, the patients who may want to participate in a clinical trial can't because they don't have the right sources. And to fix this, it's very easy. Via patient associations, or you can communicate more about it, like that patients actually know about ongoing trials, or just having a better researcher to doctor communication, like that doctors actually know if clinical trials are going on nearby the patients. Then we also need to focus more on the emotional and mental impact on pediatric patients and their families. This is one of the most important points in my opinion, because clinical trials don't just affect the body, they affect the patient's everyday life and their surrounding. Another improvement is the measure of quality of life, and not just biological markers. For example, in the case of arthritis, the disease I have, a medication can be validated as if it reduces visible signs of the disease like inflammation, redness, or swelling, or even if the blood markers are good. But for the patient, effectiveness of the medication would rather be about how the treatment also reduces fatigue and chronic pain. And this should be taken more into account. Then back to communication, it needs to be better. Communication in general needs to be better. Patients and their families should clearly understand what will happen before, during, but also after the trial. In my experience, I didn't know what happened after. What happened to my data after? I had no news. Just one day they stopped asking me to answer questionnaires or taking blood tests. So this is really in need of improvement. And looking into communication, it would also be maybe helpful to create ways for pediatric patients in the same trial to communicate anonymously, like that participants don't feel so lonely or isolated. We should also find a way to encourage and motivate children to participate in clinical trials. Now, I think this is a big point, but there's a very easy solution, like making short videos which can be shown to the children while they're at the hospital, or inviting researchers at patient organizations or at hospitals to talk about what a clinical trial is and why maybe children should come and try one. Now, another point is that pediatric patients should also have a voice when trials are designed. By this, it includes creating questionnaires, giving opinions on how treatments are given, and making sure the goals are their goals are considered, not just the researchers' goals. And by including more young patients, this can also make trials more adapted for other patients, because it's actually had a piece of ideas of actual people who have a disease that's been included. Now, to finish off, new technology like AI, real-world data, and digital twins are really helpful, and they also make trials faster, more efficient, and especially for rare diseases where there are fewer pediatric patients. So using these new technologies more is really, really helpful. Now, to summarize all of this, I think that clinical trials are important for pediatric patients, but they need to be improved. By listening more to young patients and focusing on their full experience, we can make sure that trials are better, fairer, more adapted, and more effective for children and teenagers. Thank you.
Valentina, thank you so much for your very clear, thoughtful, and I would say rather heartfelt feedback into our community on your experiences, but your advice. I would now like to turn, if I could please, to Karol Slowik, who has also joined us today. And he is not so much a patient, a young person with very important views. He's engaged also in the TEDdy network and other connections and committees regarding this whole subject. So Karol, we're very pleased to welcome you and to hear your views and advice to our community. Please go ahead.
Hello, I'm Karol Slowik, and this is Children View of Clinical Trials. In general, children are willing to help. This is the catchphrase. In general. But what are the real problems that are making the children even scared to help? But this one is patients recruiting and finding suitable trials. So we will focus on this one now. On the other hand, everything is connected to medicines and hospitals. That brings fear to them. Last and the most important word belongs to children, which is the assent. But parents, carers must give consent. Without good cooperation with young patients, the trial can be stressful or even unsuccessful. Trials should be adaptable to children of different age and special needs or diseases. Just as Valentina said, some children have the rare diseases that make it it has to be adapted, because it's harder for some children to I don't know, make some tasks than others. I have ADHD. It's hard for me to focus. So that's even a problem. I wonder how hard it would be for the other children that have it harder. Okay. Oh, next one slide. In general, children are willing to help, but again, this is the catchphrase. On the other hand, every clinic should be easily accessed by public communication, because no one in busy cities wants to drive a car 10 kilometers in, I don't know, 2 hours, when public communication could get you 10 kilometers and 10 minutes, which isn't fast, but is better. And some people don't even have cars. So this is a very important thing to take into notice, that some people just can't maybe even drive. Travel to from clinic get waste all day. Again, like I said, some people live in busy cities, and some people live in villages. Even if you are in a busy city, you even, for example, I am going to give for an example, I'm going to tell you, in Warsaw, when you want to get in a car from the center to the Piastów, which is a city bordering Warsaw, you need more than 40 minutes to do that, and this will take all day. If you have to cross some busy cities, and no one wants to waste all day. And even the trials can't take all day also, because then communication, you wake up at 6 to get sleep at, I know, 6, because you have to drive there, to the clinic, make some research, or be a subject, like not the subject, like a young person, a young patient. And there's another one. The place for trials should be adaptable to different children of different age and special needs or diseases. I told about this. I talked about this, and this is very important, because not all the children, people, even parents can take some things, and it should be adaptable to every child, not in categories. Every child. Okay, not crowdy, not loud, because some children will do that. Like, some children are very prone to sounds, loud sounds. I have this, and it's not easy for some to hear even a siren or a police siren. It's very loud, and it's not good. So it should be, I think, in a small village with a garden, so the children can really relax and focus on the clinic.
Well, Carol, thank you so much for also giving us very honest, very clear and thoughtful guidance and what the issues are, but also the benefits. I would like to now shift our webinar towards Professor Marek himself and ask him some questions. But before I start, just to reflect, it's very clear that for many diseases, especially rare diseases, especially diseases in children, we still have a lot of research to do to discover new treatments, to make sure that these are safe, effective, and then delivered in the right ways. And so the need to continue to conduct clinical trials and clinical research is very overwhelming, very powerful. We have to do more to help make this a success. And Marek, it's a great honor to be able to talk to you because you do this. You are part of that journey of helping to accelerate the way in which medicines can be discovered, tested, and then delivered to patients. And I was also very impressed that we heard from both patients a really overwhelming enthusiasm. They weren't saying, yeah, we understand trials are necessary. We'll do them because we have to. I felt we actually heard a real warmth and a willingness to play a role. You are on the other end of that relationship. You might discover that there's a clinical trial that is of interest to you and relevance to your unit and where you would like to recruit patients. What do you find as difficulties when you need to find the right patients and find the correct ones in the clinical trial? What are the kinds of difficulties that you find? And then what are the negatives that happen as a result?
Thank you, Deepak, for this question. I think that is we're struggling not only in our hospital, but also in Europe or also in another parts of the world. The same situation that we need data. Data are existing, but they are hidden. Sometimes it's difficult to get access to the data because, of course, we know that there's a level of the IT infrastructure is still significantly different, not only in the different EU member states or European countries, but even in the same country, in the same town, we get different IT systems. But I think that at least in our hospital, still the problem is that not entire medical records are in digital form. Still, we are using the paper version of some of the documents. We are using the different also free text notes, diagnostic reports, and also and probably is the most difficult problem to get a kind of the standard of the set of the information which is collected by the different medical institutions. And having different sets quite often is impossible to exchange the data between the different institutions. So, or even between different parts of the same institution. So that's something, this defragmented data, I think at the moment is the most important problem. And we know that there are a lot of the, on a European level, initiative on the national levels, even on the institutions levels, but it takes time, effort, money, and also what is, since at least in our part of Europe, but I think it's the same situation, there is also the risk about the collection as much as possible data because of the risk of the cyber attack later on. So there's another barrier to get the real open access for the different type of the data. So just to conclude, my response to your question is, I think we still need to improve, to standardize the data which we collect in our institutions, later to use this real world data to support the research, in our case, the pediatric research.
Thank you. Those are indeed really important challenges. And I hope that my colleagues, Peter and Mats, who will come on the webinar soon, will also explain some of those initiatives that you mentioned, which are trying to help with that process. But when you have hold of the data finally, Marek, you have another challenge to deal with, which is you have to compare the descriptions of patients with the eligibility criteria of a trial. A trial doesn't say we want anybody. They specify the kind of patient who is suitable. And you have to do a kind of matchmaking. How do you find that process? And do you think at times these criteria are a bit unrealistic?
Yeah, there's, I think, also global problem that sometimes the inclusion as well as exclusion criteria for the certain study are, to simply speaking, unrealistic, because they are not really, they are not consulted by the clinicians. Sometimes there's just the proposal coming from the researchers without checking this with the practitioners, with the nurses, the study nurses, but also, and this, thank you very much for this idea to invite Valentina and Carol today, because also without early engagement of the patients or young person during the work on the proposal of the this inclusion or exclusion criteria, sometimes later we get something which is absolutely unrealistic. So I think that this problem of the unrealistic criteria and later the problem with the recruitment is one of the solution is to engage as early as possibly the practitioners, the study nurses, but also the patients. And just a week ago in the European Medicines Agency, it was a very interesting workshop organized by another organization about how to improve the recruitment of children in a pediatric research in Europe at the moment. And one of the presentation was dedicated to use the simulation techniques, the techniques which we are using on our daily basis in clinical practice, also to mimic, to simulate the procedures which are planned to be included into protocol to check if they are acceptable, for example, by the children in different age groups. So that's another example how important is this early involvement of the patients and practitioners into the discussion about the protocol.
Thank you. So the process of trying to find the right patient lands pretty heavily on the clinician or the lead clinical investigator and his or her team, who have to do this complex matching of EHR data, health data that may not be well structured, and then criteria that might not be ideal. And there isn't much patient engagement. There is now a growing tendency in Europe, and it will be accelerated through something called the European Health Data Space that we might not have a chance to discuss today. But there is an initiative now that in the coming years, it will be possible for patients themselves to download a summary of their health information in a structured form. They might now become another player to help find the right trial. So a potential model is rather than the clinician or the clinical investigator being the only person with the burden of matching, maybe patients could themselves have tools, apps that allow them to see if I download my summary information and I see 5 or 6 trials, which one do I have a good match with? And could I contact that center and say, hey, am I suitable? Do you think that's a good idea? Do you think that would be something that would be helpful?
Yeah, of course, it's an extremely interesting idea, but, and as usually this but is extremely important. The problem is with the communication, with the access from the patients to the information that there is a plan to start or to run the clinical trial in specific indication, in specific age group, and mode of the treatment. I think it's also a very weak situation at the moment that these research organizations, they have a real problem to disseminate information that something is planned and the recruitment of the patient is planned, especially in case of the rare or ultra rare diseases, in which the information at the patients is located in the different institutions, sometimes in different countries. That's why how important is the disseminated of this information through some disease-specific networks, which are working on a not only local, regional, but international level. Also the patients organization, they can also sometimes, they can be a kind of the transmitter of this information from the research centers to the patients. So I think it's also extremely important to build this channel of communication between the data owners, data which are planned to be used for the research in pediatrics, and the patients. As I said, it's extremely important.
You've identified, I think, a really, really important success factor. This is not going to work unless what you say happens.
Yeah.
But you've also, in a way, cheekily given our institute some homework. I think this is something we have to help lobby for. And I hope with my colleagues, Mats and Peter, we will, and other colleagues in our institute, we will do what we can to try to promote your message, which is very important, and do what we can to help make that a success. Now, when we talk about patients having copies of their data, or you having their data and making it available in a research way, do you think patients are mostly comfortable with that? Do you think that patients, in your experience with children especially, are very nervous about their data being shared for research? Do you see them being very worried about data protection issues, or do you see them thinking that the benefits are important enough that it's worth doing? How do you find that balance?
It's very difficult to get a simple answer for this. It's
I guess
first of all depends on a trust between patients, and in case of pediatrics, we're dealing with not only patients but also the family of the patients and the researcher or caregiver. If there is no trust, there's no real communication. Also, what is extremely important to build this trust is the proper communication. The communication with a language and mode which is accepted, and the language which is simply, and the patients, family of the patients, they can understand what is the meaning of the communication. I think that's something which is really important, and is a kind of the background for the success in the recruitment, also in the retention of the patients who are already in pediatric research, and because of the not proper communication, they are leaving the clinical trials, they are stopping the participation. So, as I said, it's very difficult, it's complicated, but there are some suggestions that if there is a transparency, opening, even the mode of the communication. I like very much, the UK experience to use the kitchen table, if the kitchen in brackets, not to sit on different side of the desk, just to sit together with the patients to discuss on the same screen results and proposal for the research. This simple method, and is in practice is really very useful. So there's a lot to improve.
That's a nice visual.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Good. So now I think we turn to some slides, and Marek, will you introduce, or shall I introduce?
Yeah, I will be more than happy to introduce Mats Sandgren.
Thank you.
He is a senior industry scientific director and co-founder of one of the today's most important institution, the Innovation Through Health Data. He is a health data strategy expert with over 30 years of experience in the pharma industry, including senior leadership roles at Astra. He is internationally recognized for his work on health data, science, clinical trial, innovation, and the use of the real-world data to improve research efficiency and interoperability. The maths, you get 15 minutes to present your view on this problem, real-world data across the clinical trials life cycle. Please.
Thank you very much. I hope I'm audible, right? First of all, thank you very much for having me and the Institute for talking about this important subject of real-world data. And so I would like to provide you with some perspectives on regulatory grade clinical trials that is needed for getting new medicines to the patient, which I have the privilege to work closely on in my last 20 years in AstraZeneca. And before, I would like to give the audience some perspectives and setting the scene, what is at stake. So getting a new medicines to the patient nowadays in 2026 costs about astounding $2.3 billion US. That's enormous. And it takes no less than 12, probably most 15 years from start to end. And in the pharmaceutical industry, there is an attrition rate. And attrition rate means that it's about 95% attrition rate of new drugs. That means during the R&D journey from day one to 15 years, 95 drug projects fails and only 5 reach the patient as new medicines. And that could change, because that attrition rate of 95%, half of that is failing during the phase 1, the clinical programs, that phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3 program, which runs for about at least 50% of the whole time, and that's sort of 7 years. So now you have now you've seen the scene, and the good news is there is an opportunity to improve this process and improve clinical trials life cycle and reduce that attrition rate and make more medicines to the patient for a lower cost, but furthermore in a faster way. So what I would start off here is that during the last 10 years, hospitals in Europe and beyond is improving the quality of health data within their premises, whether that is within electronic health records or other kind of LIMS systems or lab systems. And the good point is that nowadays, the digitization of health data is improving, and it's improving by speed, but also by quality. And that sort of represents that we nowadays have structured data around the labs that is part of the primary and secondary care of patients in hospitals, and vitals, imaging, medications, and clinical notes. And clinical notes is also a large part of unstructured data. And this means that hospitals today have an untapped opportunity to use that data in a safe way to improve the clinical trial life cycle, and that is to provide the sponsors or the hospital, if the hospital is the owner of that kind of clinical research trial, by means of things that I would like to take you through: the feasibility, site selection, recruitment and enrollment, but also the trial execution, and of course the analysis of outcomes. This reflects the clinical trials life cycle. Next slide. So this is a slide just to say that things are problematic, at least in new drug development and in the pharmaceutical industry, whether it is rare diseases or if there are other kind of therapeutic areas. This goes across the different therapeutic areas. Staggering 80% of clinical trials fail to meet their recruitment targets. That means something is wrong, something is broken, the logic is wrong, and I will take you through that. 40% of trial budgets is spent on that recruitment, on trying to find the right patients for trials, and staggering 0.8 million average cost each day for development delay. And add on that is also that modern clinical trials is also more data intensive. If we are talking about the oncology trials sphere, we are talking about at least 10,000 data points per patient. So next slide. So the good thing is that these real world data exist in hospitals, and if they have the right quality, they could be used for finding the patients faster and also having a much more trial execution. And I will come to that. But one important thing with that thing is that today the standard way of doing things is actually to do a double entry. Clinical research coordinates at hospitals is spending quite a lot of time, at least 5 minutes per data point, in order to find it and resend it into the different software system that sort of pull the data into the sponsor's database. So my point here is that if we have high quality structured real world data, is actually a foundation for doing interesting things, and I will take you through that. Next slide. Together with Deepak, and let's see, it's 16 years ago now, we embarked on a fantastic journey with 35 partners in Europe. And the project was called Electronic Health Records for Clinical Research Project. That cracked one of the enigmas so to speak. How can we and how to use health data in a trustworthy way across hospitals, across regions, across countries, where data stays where it has been created. So the federated data model is what the project actually provided the technical feasibility and the roadmap for doing that. After the project, a number of companies have flourished, including, if you know, Flatiron, Trinetics, Deep6, and many others. And it's also becoming the backbone of European health data initiative, where the federated data model is the way to go, because data stays where it is, and it's possible through technical platforms that do query at the different hospital and then get aggregated numbers, and no data is leaving its hospital. And I will take you through some of the fantastic way how we can improve that in the sense of clinical trials. Next slide. So this is a more clear process of what we can do, and each of these steps could be an improvement if they are done in sequence. It could become very synergistic. So today, if I look back on my industry side, is that if you're doing a large phase 3 clinical trials, you send surveys down to the different hospitals, ask the principal investigator, here, this is a simplified protocol of the study. Do you have the patients? The CRC, who has a stockpile of similar kind of feasibility surveys on his or her desk, is saying sort of, doing a guesstimate and says, yes, we have it, but it's not data-driven. And that's sort of the data-driven aspect. The federated EHR platforms allow sort of a massive amount of pressure test if a clinical trials study design and protocol is actually something that you can recruit patients to. Having a bad feasibility, sort of today and still, the industry, at least 4, 5, 6 years ago, it took 3 to 6 months to conduct that kind of feasibility. And my last year in AstraZeneca, where we ran through a network of more than 1,000 hospitals and 200 million patients, we could do a feasibility before the coffee break in the morning. So that gave a reassurance that yes, the study design is working. It doesn't allow to find the patients, but the recruitment phase, and I will come to that later, that first step is very important, because if you don't have the study design and the protocol right in the first place, you are asking for trouble. And that kind of trouble is bad recruitment, but even worse, something that we call amendments. And that means that we didn't figure out that we need to change the protocol. And that takes 6 months to resolve to a new protocol version. And it takes about sort of $500,000 as a cost. Next slide. I think I need to speed up here. So this is something I showed you before. Having the opportunity to data-driven with high-quality data at the different hospitals, and especially we are talking about hospitals in regions, and we are talking about sort of more than 25 million, because then we can understand that doing a feasibility, actually, this is the sign of reality. Next slide. So opportunity 2, think about that we have been able to pressure test the protocol, and we know that that protocol is actually something that patients can be recruited into. What we learned in AstraZeneca between 2020 and 2022, we could sort of use the federated EHR platforms and work with those hospitals who actually were connected to that network and doing the feasibility, and then having a sophisticated feedback mechanism with the CRCs at those specific hospitals that we could suddenly identify at those hospitals could have, the different hospitals could have actually a data-driven evidence that seems to be that you have 10 patients for this study, and follow up with that kind of process. And with that data-driven approach, you could find patients much faster. Next slide. The third scenario, imagine that you have pressure test the design, you've done the feasibility, you have also identified the high potential hospitals who really have the patients that you're asking for the protocol. Then you do the execution of the trial. And the thing here is that eSource or EHR to EDC is doing something that perhaps is seen as completely self-evident, but the fact is that that process is not taking place. What is happening is that in a protocol, it might be today for an oncology study that up to 40% of the data that is part of the electronic case report form that corresponds to the clinical trials protocol actually resides in the hospital's environment, in the lab data systems or the electronic health record system. And what is happening now is that the CRCs is doing, trying to find it and do the double entry in that process. They become errors and so on and so forth. So eSource is a very simple thing. It takes the data from the source and put it directly into the sponsor's study database. And that could solve, if we're talking about 10 patients for a phase 3 oncology trials, each patient have 10,000 points, data points. If we do eSource and we can save up to, let's say, 70% of that time, it solves us around 5,000 hours. So this is really a bottleneck, and where the staff at the hospital could be engaged with more studies and finding the patients rather than doing a very bureaucratic and also not an optimal way to deal with the data. Next slide. So coming to the end here, the future, I think, is where actually the hospitals have good quality of their data and being engaged with the opportunity to create synergies of different services. Still, as I was saying, I have worked over the last 10 years with seeing evidence that this works compared to the standard way of doing things. So imagine if we have hospitals who could work together with this, can provide a much faster clinical trials system, but also this data could also help the hospital itself for its primary care and also for treatment of patients. Why? Because data can be used in a much more efficient way. And if we also add on the progress with AI in a responsible way, that high quality data can be used in a much faster and more efficient way. Next slide, and I think I'm done with that. So thank you, and sorry for taking too much of time. I was carried away.
Thanks, Mats, for this overview. My name is Peter Kasten. I'm part of the iHD organization as well, and I have also a bit of a background in the pharmaceutical industry. Worked for 25 years at J&J, but since a couple of years I've been working together with Deepak and Mats in I'm not going to go.
Deepak, could you introduce Peter for the audience? Sorry.
Area.
Marek, if you don't mind, I won't, because I think we're a bit tight for time. Peter's said a little, if that's okay. Let's just run on with Peter. You don't mind if we just let you speak instead? Sorry,
no,
Marek,
of course.
You need to use the time well.
Absolutely. And recognizing we are already a bit behind our intended schedule, So if we go to the next slide, please, and I want to just highlight that, yes, real-world data is supporting clinical research, but it's only usable when it's trusted, scalable, and interoperable. So that's based on a few pillars that are to be considered, like policy frameworks, the what, the rules, the who has access to the data, or requirement for informed consent, what required for a patient to say yes or no. That information is all covered in policy and need to be worked. So there are a number of bodies and processes that that information and data is correctly made available, and therefore in place, regulatory authorities and so on. And last but not least, definitely not least, is the interoperability standards. Otherwise, if you don't rely on standards, you would be confronted, and that's what we see primarily in Europe today, very diverse and a very scattered solution. So there are solutions that are in place for a number of the elements that have been brought forward already today. But difficulty is that they are typically very much focused and very limited in use. Therefore, on the next slide, please, I would like to refer to what Deepak and Mats already alluded a bit to, and that's the European health data space, one of the major European government initiative in the area of health. It all is based on data. So health data from, excuse me, apps or in registries, or more specifically in electronic health records. And the stakeholders involved in relying on that health data are in first space the citizen themselves. So patients, children, parents, or grown-ups participating or willing to work on their health have control of their data. But also that data is available for healthcare professionals and accessing only the relevant health data, relevant for this specific situation. Next to those as well, policymakers and researchers. All of that with the intent of better diagnosis, treatment, improved patient care, improved patient safety, as well as better health policies and greater opportunities for research and innovation. So that's all what EHDS is intended to do across Europe, and therefore not, let's say, avoiding all of those silos. Go to the next slide, please. Under the umbrella of Europe, there are a number of European initiatives, and they are connecting together. Horizon Europe is an overarching initiative that looks into research in Europe, research and innovation, and it's funding a number of initiatives. One of the other examples I would like to highlight is ECShare, and I'll go more in depth on those. But what we heard today as well is about visibility to the data. We're participating in a clinical trial, but we don't know what data is or how the data is flowing and on what is being captured and what's the outcome. There has been an initiative, a recent initiative and still ongoing, which is called Facilitate, that puts the patient at the center of that. Now, on the next few slides, I'll go a bit more in depth on ECShare, because there are a few use cases that are covered there that have been mentioned by Mats. And the first one, and it's a very busy slide, and I'm going through this a bit in detail. But you heard also Valentina referring to a tool called CureWiki. Well, CureWiki is a type of a PHR, and PHR stands for Patient Health Record. If me as a patient or anybody else would like to see, okay, I'm interested in understanding a study, whether I could be eligible for a study because I don't find the treatment, and the doctor that I'm visiting doesn't find immediately a treatment that can help me. I'd like to go on understand what would be feasible. That person could then be, or me, I could push that, what's being called the yellow button. ECShare is a program where we are referring to the yellow button. I could push that yellow button, and then under number 1, you see the IPS Plus being shared. What the IPS Plus is, I'll come to that later on. But then it's made available to a tool. That tool that resides even on my mobile. That tool then looks into what are all the clinical trials inclusion and exclusion criteria and sees where are those studies happening. That comes up then with saying, oh, you have an 80% compatible ongoing study X, and that's happening in hospital A, B, and C, which are near your location. Then I get a notification. That's that flow number 2. Once I then would understand and see, yes, I'm interested in participating in that particular study at hospital B, I could let that hospital B and the research group there know that I'm interested to participate in that study. The hospital or the research group in that hospital then could then get the IPS Plus and could do a first pre-screening based on a few missing elements that might still not be 100%, let's say, matching. There could be a number of additional questions being raised and or even a visit if that would be required. Based on that, it could be then found eligible for participating in the study. And then the research team then helps with getting an informed consent form to me, and also informs then the general practitioner or my general doctor that is treating me. So that's kind of the use case that is foreseen with the EPTRI program. And for this program, there are at this point in time a number of what's being called open calls. And an open call means that there is some use cases that are being tested and piloted to prove for the European Commission to say, hey, based on this, effectively, this is a good capability. We recommend that this will become the European standard. So that's one of the use cases, patient self-nomination as possibly eligible for a trial. On the next slide, we have another use case, which goes more into study feasibility, based on information like Mats was referring to in the federated model made available for assessing whether a study is finding potential patients or whether there needs to be some study redesign required in view of being as fast as possible and as smooth as possible running the trial. So that's, I'm not going through the entire flow here, but it is kind of what Mats has been referring to. It's also part of the use cases for ECShare. Also here, we are having a number of research organizations working together with a number of technology partners, looking into ways how to set this up in a uniform fashion, based on standards information. And then the last use case that I would like to refer to on the next slide is what Mats was alluding to at the end, where he was talking about e-source, where a patient can give consent of relying on the data that the patient themselves is capturing potentially even, or data that is available at the hospital to be automatically into the study database entered, instead of having people having to do it manually and therefore not having sufficient time to be working with the patient. So this is another flow that is also with the use cases being done this year in proposal of recommendations for the European Commission. On the next slide, you see that all of the use cases before are relying on standards. Standards approaches for data being made available in a common way. And for that, the ECShare program has worked with the International Patient Summary. Not something invented new, something that existed before, but has been focused initially on more on cross-border clinical care. If me, as a Belgian citizen, would be going to Italy and need to be hospitalized there, I would like that the hospital there knows where I'm allergic for, what medicines I'm taking, and the IPS is intended to share that data in a common way. The EPTRI program foresees that this is going to be also applicable and not just based on a standard document, but also feasible and usable in Europe. What we have been doing within the EPTRI program is also adding a number of things like what information is missing in the IPS, which is then relevant for research, and how does it map? And therefore the IPS Plus has been created. It's a small addition to the International Patient Summary that provides the tools to be useful for clinical research and public health. And it's all based on standards for interoperability. So standards allowing to talk the same language, and not only the same language, but also the same carrier for that language. Standards is important, as also has been referred to Marek already as well. And on the next slide, I'm also going to refer to an industry-led initiative. So before we had all initiatives that were looking into the future and the future in Europe more specifically. Within the situation of today, there's also opportunities to already make progress on e-source, and that's the last use case that I refer to within the EPTRI program, but also that Mats has been referring to. iHD is working together with a number of research institutions globally and a number of sponsors, pharmaceutical companies, to look into how to make this scalable, and not in one-offs, but more focusing on making this something that runs smoothly and automatically in the future, of course. And it's still an ongoing initiative, and a task force is ongoing, but it is a future that is real. It is already running in all of these hospitals that are mentioned as core members, but also many more. But it is not common yet, so that everybody is currently relying on this. And that's what the Scale Up Task Force is trying to do through reports, publications, and webinars, inform the future and how it could be made feasible. And on the next slide, I'm already giving some ideas of what are enablers for that capability when it comes to healthcare organizations, as well as for EHR vendors. And again, coming back to structured data. So for all doctors on the call here, structured data is ensuring it is smooth. Now, it could be, let's say, that tools are required to make sure that structured data is immediately available in the electronic health record, but it is supporting all future initiatives that are relying on innovation and research, as well as on clinical care, cross-border care. There are a number of other additional elements like auditability, kind of relying on HL7 FHIR, as I was already mentioning. That's the interoperable standard, and the IPS Plus, that's then more future-oriented. Codings like LOINC and SNOMED. Now I'm running and I'm calling out now a few names here that are probably not recognized by a lot of people, but these are the language that we talk. That is being talked within care and in research, if you want to exchange information in different languages. There needs to be some commitment, of course, on making sure this works from the healthcare organizations, and from an EHR vendor's perspective. There are also a number of technical requirements there. I'm not going to go too much in depth. The task force has been publishing all of this information before, and it is available. So in the interest of time, to allow still a number of questions to be asked, this was my last slide, so I'm giving the word back to you, Marek. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Peter. Thank you for this very interesting talk. Now we get a part with the interactive session, and the title of this part is What Stakeholders Can Do Today. And now I hand over to Deepak to guide this session. Deepak, please.
That's very kind of you. Thank you very much. Well, dear audience, I hope that you've heard a lot about how initiatives and people are trying to make the health information collected by clinicians in electronic health record systems reusable and reused for accelerating clinical research. But we're proposing that health data is more widely used, and we'd love to have your opinion on that. Now, some of you in this audience are patients or people who have joined the webinar because you connect with or represent patients. Others of you will think to yourself, I'm not a patient, I'm a clinician, I'm a technologist, I'm a policymaker, whatever. But you know, we're all people who get ill eventually. And although we may not necessarily all get a rare disease, we all have illnesses where we benefit from treatment and where new treatment advances are welcome. So the issue is relevant to every one of you, whether you're wearing today the hat of a patient or the hat of some other actor. And we wanted to ask you a few questions. This is an online poll, and I'm going to hand over, I'm not sure whether it's to Eleonora or Sandra or someone else, to just guide us through a small number of questions. I suggest we go with the first three and not the fourth one in the interest of time. Can I ask one of you to help with guiding the audience into how to respond? Can I just check? Is somebody from the communications organizing team able to jump in and just say
Yes.
how we get the survey? Oh, thank you.
It's in the chat, so people can access through the chat. We have
it's
10
in
responses.
The chat. I'm sorry, I thought it would be on screen. My apology. Okay.
Let me just
12 people have already responded. It's only me that's behind. Sorry. Okay. So what
we
you
can
have
see the
is
results at the end when people
Okay. Brilliant. So why don't we go? We've got three questions, I think, to ask you. The first one is on screen in the chat to me now, not on your, it's on your screen if you go to the chat. How much would you support the use of your own EHR to design better clinical trials, recruit the right patients during the trial? In other words, if it was your personal data held inside an electronic health record system of a hospital caring for you, and it was possible for your data to be used in the way that Marek and Mats and Peter have described, and responding very much to what Valentina and Carol were requesting, would you support it? So I'm seeing so far 20 people have responded, but actually there are 44 people in the call. So I would like you to hurry up and get on with it, because we've got another couple of questions. And Albina, can I just ask you, shall we do all three questions and then look at the answers? Is that the easiest thing? Okay, well, why don't we go to the second question? We've got 21 responses on the first question. Could you, there we are. So this is a question. Do you think governments and the EC should invest in helping hospitals to collect and share better quality data? So you heard from Marek in his answer to my first interview question that a lot of the data today is held on paper or in free text letters and reports. It's not easy for computers to get the data out of that, to understand it and work out which patients have what diseases and treatments and so on. But it's going to need an investment, and hospitals are already struggling with their budgets. They've got patient care needs, staffing needs, medical equipment needs, intensive care needs. it feels a bit unfair to say to patients, you won't have care because we're investing in IT. I think this is where the governments and European Commission should do more to help hospitals. But do you think so? Do you think that this is a priority, or do you think this is just a bit too geeky, a bit of a distraction? 16 people have so far responded. Now, come on, wake up, team. We want a few more responses before I'll let you see the third question. 17. Come on, let's reach 20. 3 more people give their opinion. Oh, we're nearly there. Okay, good. Could we have the third question, please? So the third question, you heard actually from quite a few different people in this discussion today about patients being more involved in connecting themselves to trials, using their own data, and an increasing likelihood that people will be able to download a copy of their own data. Some health systems already offer this, others don't, but it will be a requirement through the European Health Data Space that Peter described. But do you think this will be an important added value to patients and to clinical research? Is this going to make a big difference, or is this a bit of a toy, not really important? What's your feeling? Is this something that could make a difference? We're nearly at my 20 magic number. Couple more responses, please. Okay, good. I'm going to say the poll might continue, but can we now start to look at the answers? And Marek, could you stand by to look as well with me? And let's look at the 3 question answers and see what we find our audience is telling us. I know it'll take a few moments to just get the results onto a screen where we can see them. But I'm not sure how we see them.
Yeah, I think that we must get the support from Eleonora to show the final result of the responses for the question number 1.
Thank you.
As I well remember, it was more than 40% of the people saying yes, that, but this is the second question. Do you think governments and European Commission should invest in helping hospitals? Yes, more than 40% of the responses were in favor of this action. Could we return back to the first question? How much would you support the use of your own electronic health data to design better trials? And now I can see these results exactly. The average score was 4.1. 45% of the responses were with the maximum score 31.4.
Marek, I'm not sure why. I can't see the results, so I'm really listening to you carefully.
Yeah, I am opening the results from the chat directly, so.
Yes, the results are in the chat. So the questions are in the chat, and you can see the results also in the chat.
In the chat, so
the questions.
Deepak, I can help you with the...
No, don't worry. I don't need to see them. I need you to see them, and I need you to make a comment.
It's interesting also that you should be informed about the results of this survey.
Yeah.
And
well, I can see the poll questions. I can't see the answers.
Yeah.
But don't worry. I mean,
and
I think
In fact, if I may comment, this result responses for the third question, this is the lowest score, 4. Probably not significant to compare with the two others, but yeah, there's but still, again, the majority of the people that are in favor to use this technique, this tool, that patients could self-refer for a trial, offering a copy of their own electronic health data. So I think it's all of these three questions are illustrate very clearly what was discussed today during the webinar. And Deepak, as you agree, we get 5 minutes left. Let's summarize what was said today. Maybe
So
we
your
can get
conclusion of the
Eleonora
poll, Marek,
again.
is that there is good support from our audience
Yes.
for these uses of data and for investing better in better quality data.
Yeah, and
Yeah,
if
I can see your chat looks different to mine. That's the reason. Probably it's
because
just a
at the
computer.
moment,
Don't worry.
chat was using for the pool, and I must do it.
Don't worry, I'm probably not compatible
No,
with whatever
okay.
it was doing. But don't worry. But you've described the results. That's great to know.
Yeah,
But when it comes to summing up your feelings on behalf of everybody who's spoken, what's your sense of the future for us?
I would like to confirm that, of course, there is no doubt that we must improve our utilization of the existing real-world data for all phases of the research. If we are talking about the clinical trials with medical devices or medicinal products, it's obvious that it for sure should be used for the feasibility, if the trials are feasible, later for the recruitment and retention of the potential participants. But as was clearly presented, we are not able to achieve this goal without the standardization of our data, standardization of the format of the different issues related to the format of the data. And as also mentioned, in the future, in the European Union, this European health data space is a clear program, but we must really speed up to reach the timelines proposed for this regulation. Is just 3 years left to improve the quality of, first of all, the collection, but later interoperability between different sets of the data. So I think this is absolutely need at the moment, and it is impossible to plan for the longer time the improvement in research in pediatrics without this solid base in the real world data. So that's the opinion of the researcher, clinician, and of course, Deepak, please comment from your side.
No, you've summarized it very well. And I think for our institute, the question is, is the data ready for all of these benefits? And I think that the gap we see is that the data is not really very ready. and we only have a few years to improve the data we routinely collect in healthcare, improve its structure, improve its standardization, improve its interoperability between systems, because we will soon have a chance to do fantastic things, more things with the data. And if we've not got the data that we can use, we're all going to be very, very, really foolish in having squandered the investments that are being made by not allowing the data to be actually useful. So communicable data, queryable data, analyzable data, but actually analyzable rubbish, to me is just a failure, because it means we have collectively failed to grow into this opportunity. And I think the hearing from our two young people at the beginning was very powerful. They want it, they're ready, they're willing, they're permitting. Kind of, we're going to let them down if we don't do more ourselves.
Last comment, thank you all of the participants of this webinar. Thank you for interest to attend the webinar. And from our side, from the EPTRI side, I can confirm that for sure we will need another webinars to continue our in charge of the information as we did today. Thank you very much, and thank you, Deepak. It was my real honor to chair this webinar together.
Well, a real pleasure both ways, I think, Marek. So thank you, and thank EPTRI, the EPTRI team, for having put this together, which has been quite a lot of work. They've worked very hard to run this event. So thank you to them as well.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye, Carol.
I